Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 19th of March and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 13, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
Now, just be warned, this is a busy show, isn't it, Curtis?
Yes,
today?
yeah.
So,
Yes.
we've got a few things going on.
Strap yourselves in for this one.
Yeah. So, to start off, in terms of shout-outs, 2 dinners this week. So, you got the Fleet News Awards this week that were on Wednesday night. And then Thursday night was the IMI dinner. And I know everybody's looked forward to getting out and about, seeing a bit of physical networking and awards events, and these are 2 big ones to kick off the year that have taken place this week. So big shout out to everybody that attended, friends of the podcast, and congratulations to all the winners, the nominees, and everybody in the night. And I can imagine that it was a great event for our friend of our podcast, Steve Nash, who is coming back onto the podcast soon. He has committed to do that, and his team. And congratulations again to everybody on the evening there.
Yeah, and good luck to anyone who attended both events, because they were on consecutive nights. So we wish you well. Hope you're feeling perky this Saturday morning.
I can imagine some of them have probably just come back from NADA as well.
Yes.
They're probably due for a good rest for a period of time.
Yeah, but as you say, it's a busy show, because on this week's show we have 2 special guests. Are you going to tell us about the first one, Phil? Yeah,
so on this week's show we've had a special guest. We've had a conversation with our friend of the show, Stephen Whitton, who is talking through exclusively about the launch of his Menable Me, which is a new interactive online networking service that is open to everybody in the automotive sector to join. So listen out for that. Very interesting and a great move by Steve, that on the Menable Me.
Yes, and our other guest is industry guru Steve Young, CEO of Analyst ICDP, and we'll be getting his take on the latest restructuring at Ford. But also do watch out for our longer conversation with Steve, where he's talking about the ramifications of the war in Ukraine on the automotive sector. And that's on the back of a blog that he issued at the beginning of the week. And Steve has a unique perspective on the crisis, as he was actually the COO of the Russian-owned van maker GAZ back in the 2008, 2009, around that time. So the full interview will be on your podcast feed from Tuesday. So do look out for that.
Yeah, and before you go, if you, as Curtis always says, if you do want to get in touch, then send us a press release, or you want to come onto the show to have your view on some news or share an exclusive interview, then please do get in touch. And you can get in touch with Curtis or myself through any of the social media channels, LinkedIn, Twitter or Facebook, or you can email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com and just drop us an email there. And just one thing before we move on to the headlines, because I've been asked quite a few times this week about it, that a friend of the show and a friend of many people within the industry who kindly left us recently was James Davis. And now James Davis, as part of his will, he did leave his MG Express 1.4 105 BRM special van. Now, anybody that's on social media, you've probably seen it. And if you know anything about James Davis, JD, as we all knew him, it's immaculate. It's trophy blue, red leather interior, flamboyant as you would expect, in absolute pristine condition. Now, this is going up for auction as per the instructions from JD. It'll be going through Mannheim, UK, down at Shepshed on Monday. this Monday coming, Monday the 21st, and all the proceeds will be from this special vehicle will be donated to Alzheimer's Society as per the instructions. There'll be no fees, no buyer's fees, and there's no VAT either. And you can watch it, get involved online, get a bid, and probably, I suspect, throw the guides out of the window on this one. Because I know a lot of people are getting behind this, so I expect this will go for a reasonable amount of money. It's a 2003 MG Express 1.4 105 BRM special van. So you check it out on the either the Mannheim website or any of the social channels. You'll see images of it.
Yeah, it's an amazing vehicle, and as you say, there's going to be an awful lot of interest in that. So, do wish everyone well on Monday for that.
Yeah. So, what are the headlines other than the two specials that we've got this week, Curtis, that we're trying to get in between?
We've just about got time for some headlines. So, car sales conversion rates are stronger for agency model, according to Polestar's UK CEO, although not everyone agrees. 94% of car buyers are now shopping by monthly costs. The SMMT and BVRLA welcome electric van grant extension, and what is now a regular weekly slot, we've got another dealer acquisition to talk about.
We have. So again, opening up there, we've got the auto car business. Now, we do some great stories always in auto car business, but this is based on the webinar that was last Friday, I think. Still available for download if you've not seen it. And this is that car sale conversions rate stronger for agency models, says Polestar UK CEO. Now, there was a bit of challenge on this one because he was joined alongside Duncan McPhee, who is the COO of Lookers as well. So always makes for an interesting interview, this, when you've got two very different businesses talking about a subject matter.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, because Duncan McPhee, as you say, COO of Lookers, and Lookers use the Polestar agency model alongside the franchise model for other brands, said there hasn't actually been a marked change at Lookers, but he goes on to add it's... With agency, it's a very simple, transparent model. Customers like ease, and to have transparency. It's very, very profitable. It's about delivering better customer experience, reducing distribution costs in the network, and having a more transparent way of interacting with customers. So it is all about transparency, as he says, but Jonathan Goodman, the point that he makes is that the conversion rates that he's seeing is 10 to 13%, and with that figure based on a sale within 60 days of the first time a customer actually touches a Polestar, be it online or whatever. So, we can talk about agency each and every week from now on, can't we? Because there's so much happening out there. But it is interesting to just see the two sides of the coin there, because there is a place for it, and customers do like it. But whether or not the conversion rates are higher, really, I think, does remain to be seen.
Yeah, and as you say that, I mean, the third speaker was Tony Whitehorn, and anybody that's in the automotive industry will know Tony as the previously worked for Hyundai and Toyota, and now is an automotive consultant at Endeavour. And again, he was part of the debate, and I did manage to watch that debate, and sort of talking around sort of what they expect, that all the research shows that consumers like the agency model. Consumers don't enjoy going into dealerships and haggling, and we now buy a lot of things online. And with the agency model, if you don't get it online, then often the retailer can deliver the car, and the customer will drive this change, and the customer wants transparency, and as you say, in that surety. And we kind of touch on this a little bit with the chat with Steve Young, don't we? With the changes at Ford around that model, the Ford Blue and the Model E. proposition that we've known about this week. But interesting debate, that one, between the three of them, and particularly, as you said, Curtis, between the Polestar and Lookers, having that pure online presence versus the blended view that Lookers have.
And next headline is from AM Online, and it is 94% of car buyers shopping by monthly cost. So no big surprise here, although the percentage is high, but the story looks at car buyers looking to change their car in the coming months are increasingly shopping with a monthly rather than total figure in mind. So this research comes from AA Financial Services, and as I said, it reveals that 94% of in-market buyers surveyed had a monthly budget in mind. But I think one of the more interesting aspects of this story is looking at how the money is being spent, and there's also a fascinating gender split. So of those looking for a new car, the research revealed that the average amount buyers are looking to spend is £422 per month, which I think that's slightly higher than I would have thought. Phil, I don't know.
As an average, you would these days, but you'd wonder how much that is an increase in terms of the price increases. But
there were, however, some notable differences in the average monthly budgets of some groups, which brings us on to that gender split, because men in this survey appear to be incredibly gung-ho and keen to buy and spend more. So men plan to spend on average 38% more each month than women. That equates to £130 on their next car. And as a proportion of all outgoings for the month, male car buyers were also prepared to commit 22% of their monthly income for the car, compared to 20% for female buyers. So it's some interesting gender splits there, Phil.
Yeah, and like you say, all these kind of stats start to show out a little bit in terms of, like you say, that gender priority, gender split in many ways to a certain extent. But also, I mean, it does talk about, obviously, they go into details around the region as well, in terms of where buyers are the largest sort of monthly spenders by territory and by region, etc. So, and I'm wondering with some of this how much, there's an EV element in some of this, and a household income relevance to some of this as well, in terms of that survey by region. But a bit of a good insight there, as you say, coming from AA Financial Services with James Fairclough there, who comments on a lot of the findings in the report there that's at AM Online.
Steve, last weekend on the podcast, Philip and I chatted about the latest strategic developments at Ford, and would be interested in hearing your thoughts on what's happening there. So just to recap, Ford announced a structural change which will see the car business split into two divisions: Ford Blue for ICE vehicles and Ford Model E for electric. But this was also accompanied by news about the disappearance of Ford of Europe as a separate entity, as Ford switches from regional reporting to 5 new global divisions. So this was sort of drip-fed out over the course of probably a week or so. Well, what's your take on these developments?
Well, I spent some years in my early career at Ford, so there's a little bit of me that's still got the Ford Blue Oval. So I was interested to see the developments. I think the Model E and Ford Blue division is quite understandable. Farley trailed it in February, and in some ways it reflects some of the thinking that Herbert Diess at Volkswagen also talked about last year, when he talked about the weight that the restructuring of the ICE elements of the business would put on the business as a whole, and comparing that to someone like a Tesla, who's doesn't have that burden. So it makes some sense, I think, in terms of the thinking and the pace at which they want to change, and trying to avoid compromises. The people who are involved in the Model E business can push forward with those products right the way through, and that goes right the way through to the dealer, can push forward with those in the way that they want to do, without having to compromise the whole time by saying, oh, but by the way, we need to think about what happens with the ICE and what's the share that's going through the dealership and the profitability and so on. It makes the businesses stand on their own feet. So I think that makes sense. Will it lead to a spin-off of, or a split of the business into two at some point in the future? It might do. I think if it does, it will then come back to Deese's point that a Ford Model E business might attract more investors and put a higher stock valuation on that than the people who would be attracted to an integrated business with the weight of restructuring on it. So I think all that side makes sense to me.
And I guess a follow-up question to that, Steve, would be, with Ford Model E, would you envisage dealers just concentrating on the electric proposition and maybe new dealers coming to Ford just to sell Model E?
I think it's up to Ford how they choose to structure their network, but I would certainly expect that they would, Ford would require that the dealers had a focused approach to the Model E business, even if they held, both franchises, and let's just call them franchises at the moment. They've made that clear in the States, so they've what they've described, what Jim Farley described as the selling model for Model E in the future is, to all intents and purposes, agency. So he's talked about, we hold the stock, we'll set the pricing, and there's nothing that stops you doing agency in the States. People think it's illegal, but that's not actually true. So they may well go down an agency type route, not only in the States but also in Europe for Model E, and you would have perhaps a Model E agency contract and a Ford Blue franchise contract. But they will certainly require, I think, a dedication of focus to reflect in the dealership what they will have in the core business.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a good point that, and we sort of touched on it last week in terms of that, is it that the Model E or the EV proposition is where they do move online? And I know you've got a view on that, because, the OEMs that are trying to operate purely on an online environment and using EV as the launch pad for that, Volvo being one of them, it's very difficult to do without a physical infrastructure and a dealer network support, be it agency or non-agency, isn't it?
Customers don't want it. Customers don't want a pure online journey. It's a minority interest, in the same way that a purely physical journey is a minority interest, and by minority I mean sort of sub 10%. The vast majority of people, of all age groups, all markets that we've looked at, want to have the option of both physical and online, and to use them in the combination that suits them. And so you need to have both. And the fact that someone might in the end sign the final contract online, or put a deposit down online, doesn't make that an online sale, in the sense that buying something from eBay is online. The people still generally want to visit the dealership at some point for something, and that's going to continue to be the case, and it'll be the case for Ford with Model E, and it will be the case for Volvo and everyone else.
And Steve, just picking up on the point about Ford of Europe disappearing as an entity and the emergence of these 5 global divisions. So we've talked about Ford Blue, Ford Model E. There'll also be Ford Pro, which will be for commercial vehicles, Ford Drive, which is renamed from Ford Mobility, and Ford Credit. So what do you make of the disappearance of Ford of Europe?
I think to a large extent, Europe has always been Ford Pro. I mean, when I go back to when I was working there, then transit in the UK generated the entire profits of the Ford Motor Company worldwide. So things have moved on a little bit from then, but it's very much the sort of cash cow, and they've globalized the commercial vehicle business substantially. Obviously over the last 10 or 20 years, you can buy transit in the States and many other places around the world. So they putting it into the product divisions, I think makes a lot of sense. Ford of Europe uh, was only sort of an umbrella under which things reported. The products have been global to some extent, at least. Since Mondeo. It's
Yeah.
in the word.
Yeah.
So the product platforms have been shared. The powertrains are shared. The ICE production in the UK, the actual engines themselves go all over the world. So the regional structure has been less significant in reality than perhaps people think.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, that, isn't it? And I suppose do you think Jim's on the right side then, do you think, with the where the direction he's gone with the heading up the Model E rather than the Ford Blue then?
Well, it depends which country. It depends which country you're sitting in, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes.
If you look at it from a European perspective, then definitely yes. But if you look at the pace of the rollout of electric cars in the US, then I think there's a good few years left
Yes.
in combustion engine cars and gas guzzlers to go there.
So, it wasn't necessarily a leading question, that one, but
Mm.
yeah, it was quite interesting when you see the announcement that they'd appointed a president for the Ford Blue element of it, and that Jim Farley was remaining with the Ford Model E. But
Well, at least he still gets to drive a proper Mustang as his company car.
that's always, yeah, it's always an interesting one, that one. And thanks very much. I'll jump in my V8. Yes, but no, that's fantastic. Thanks again, Steve. Gives a little bit of meat on the bone and some thoughts around it, because as you know, these things that we know that things started to come out sort of February about this, and then it was followed up more recently in terms of the split of the division. But it puts a little bit more, I say, meat on the bone. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
No, that's a pleasure, Philip, and thanks, Curtis. Thanks for the invitation again.
Well, some great insight there from Steve Young. It is particularly interesting because Steve, of course, as he says, is an ex-Ford man, and I know a lot of people who have worked for Ford, and they never leave Ford. They always revert back to Ford and their Ford days, and Ford, for many of there's quite a few industry leaders. It was very much their sort of university time. The 3, 5, 10 years or whatever they spent at Ford has really sort of informed the rest of their career. So some great insights there from Steve.
Yeah, and I mean, we could have carried that. I mean, we could have sort of got into lots of different conversations with that chat with Steve, couldn't we? Particularly around, the future of EV, and he's been on previous podcasts talking about obviously the aftermarket and relevance of EV, and obviously we've chatted to him about agency model before. But as we said on, always with Steve, if you do want to check out some of the views from Steve, then check out LinkedIn and check out his blogs. He sits in a very unique position, doesn't he, in the sector in terms of his views and his access to conversation and what's going on. And as you say, a very interesting background as Steve, and right at the start of the show there, with his experience on Russia, on the Russian market that he talks on the interview about, and his experience with Ford, with the blue badge that is still with him, isn't it? I can imagine he's got a blue oval badge somewhere on his desk or in his office, I imagine, but as many others do.
Yeah, most definitely. And do catch the full interview we did with Steve, which will be on your podcast feed from Tuesday. In the meantime, you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So, as Kirsty said there, we've had an acquisition. It's and this is with the story back on AM Online, and this is that Parks Motor Group acquires Mackie Motors, Arbroath and Brechin. Is it Brechin dealerships? I'll get that wrong. I'll have my Scottish friends absolutely screaming at me at the at their podcast feed this morning. I do apologise for that.
Yeah, they're throwing their cornflakes.
There will be. But
yeah.
But yeah, again, as you say there, a great little acquisition there where Parks Motor Group have extended its representation of Renault, Dacia, MG and Nissan with the acquisition there of Mackie Motors. But a great little move there. And you're seeing these, we've seen some of the big acquisitions, aren't we, by some of the bigger groups. But these sort of mid AM100 operators are just starting to get a little bit bigger, aren't they? Just taking up these territories now that we're starting to see. And as some of these sort of more privately owned businesses decide to exit the market.
And it's just a couple of weeks ago that we were actually reporting that Parks had joined the Lexus franchise and added to its representation of Hyundai, Skoda and Toyota through the acquisition of Borders Motor Group. I think that was just a couple of weeks ago. So, there's a quick follow-up to that. And also last week, it was only last week, we were reporting that Johnson Cars had acquired Trust Group and Chorley Group had added 2 Citroen sites from BCC Cars. So there's an awful lot of activity going on out there at the moment in terms of acquiring businesses and sites.
There is, yeah, and I think it is going to be we talk about agency a lot, we talk about EV a lot, and I suspect that we're going to start to talk about this a lot as we sort of see, consolidation and alignment between manufacturers and dealer groups and where they sit. So it's going to be definitely an interesting year ahead of us again, as always.
And final news story for this week before we chat with Steve Whitton is from Motor Trader, and the headline is SMMT and BVRLA welcome electric van grant extension. So this was the announcement made at the beginning of the week on the extension to 2025 of the plug-in van grant, which has been universally welcomed by the industry and specifically by the SMMT and BVRLA, because it just gives everyone a longer breathing space, because I think the assumption from some in government was that EVs were following in EV vans were following closely behind EV cars, but of course they're not. It's coming from a much lower base and will require more time. So I think this is the welcome acknowledgement that it will take time. They do need the incentives, and those incentives will run until 2025.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, we talk about grants around the car market, not just the commercial vehicle market, but there's a split view whether should the grants be extended and continued for cars as well as commercial vehicles. Would it help, or is that not the issue of changing towards an electric vehicle, that it is all about the infrastructure now and availability and things like that are all starting to play in, and there's a part of the market that believe that the grant won't make any difference with the growth of cars. And others believe it would continue to grow. So, I don't know. Is 2 years long enough? Do we need it for longer? Should some of these grants be extended right out to 2030 or 2035 for commercial vehicles? Possibly, but I think anything like this is positive news just to help that transition towards electrification for the market. So you can see why it's been very much welcomed by the associations.
Yeah, and there's a good quote here from Toby Poston, who's the Director of Corporate Affairs at the BVRLA, saying this is good news and comes at a perfect time for the fleet industry as it struggles with rising operating costs and global shortages of electric vans. The 2-year extension on the grant will enable van operators to plan their fleet upgrades with greater confidence. Next up, we're delighted to welcome back to the podcast Stephen Whitton from Manable. And Steve's got an exciting update on what's happening at Manable. But first of all, welcome back, Steve. How are you doing?
Hey guys, it's great to be back, as always. Yeah, I'm doing well, actually.
Yeah,
how are you?
Excellent. Well,
we're good.
It's good to talk to you live.
Yeah, a little bit of a chat here, Steve, the three of us.
A three-way conversation here. This is a first.
I know it is always a little bit. Yeah, it is always a little bit odd because normally, the little Manable moments are normally recorded and sort of talk to myself a little bit, really. So it's unusual to be getting your voices in my ears.
Yeah.
And it's always good because, in fairness, me and Curtis do go into the Manable as if it is new to us. We don't pre-listen to it or anything. It is. We always go into it waiting to hear what you're talking about each time you're on. So it's as fresh to us as it is to the listeners.
Yeah, with our fingers crossed.
I know, and we've agreed that I keep you on your toes, don't I? You never quite know what's coming next.
You do indeed. Now, Steve, as I said in the intro, you've got quite an exciting new development at Manable. So do you want to share what it is with our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, originally the Manable movement went out with a very clear kind of employer-based model that we would engage with businesses across the sector, make it the CEO or the MD's responsibility to champion well-being and mental health across their business, and that's worked really well. And we've had the usual sort of early adopters and people who've been very supportive. We've got some fantastic members on board, but what we've noticed is that it's inconsistent in terms of how that message gets disseminated through the business. So early doors, one of the things we said was we'll have to find a way of creating something that actually complements that kind of top-down approach with a very pragmatic bottom-up approach as well.
Yes.
So with that in mind, what we've done is we've created Manable Me, which is a web app platform. It sort of sits halfway between a Facebook group and a WhatsApp group. And before anyone gets frightened or excited, it doesn't require any of the personal information or links to personal social media accounts or anything like that some of those others do. And it's just a hub where people can gather and create a bit of a community where they can help support each other and talk about mental health and well-being stuff and have fun while they're doing it.
And that's really the key, isn't it? Because it is interactive. You are talking to other people. You can see other people within it, as you would do on Facebook or Instagram.
100%. I mean, that we've said all along. We use our rev counter analogy, which is all about recognising that everyone has mental health. Unfortunately, across our sort of culture and society, really, we've tended to only pick up mental health when it becomes a problem. So when someone gets to kind of 8 or 9 out of 10 on that rev counter, and what Manable Me is aiming to do is to get everyone talking about this stuff as an everyday subject and sharing stuff, sharing the load. For example, a technician in the south of England could be talking to another technician in Northern Ireland. Where they wouldn't normally be talking. They'd be sharing problems and issues day to day with the people around them. But if they're connecting and making friends across the industry, across the country, and even across the globe eventually, we think, well, that's really a great thing and has got to be the starting point for managing mental health and well-being.
And just with this, I mean, I'm a member. I did join after our initial conversation, and I think you made the point earlier that this is not a Facebook. It is not about capturing data. It's not about sharing data. It's not about advertising. This is about a closed net community to share their thoughts, their ideas, their content, links to external content. I mean, not to promote it, but the Motor Trade Radio podcast with Enable Me is on there on a weekly basis as well. But it is other things like that, isn't it? And that the members can actually join groups that are looking at specific areas of mental health and well-being, etc., and just pick up on things. And I think, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because there's different bits of this, isn't it? It's not just a chat feed. There is other things going on within the app itself.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, literally, you join either from the web or from your phone. And the journey is that as you join, you create your own personal profile. As we've said, it's not linked to Facebook or your phone number, so you can go in completely anonymously if you want. Although, over time that probably defeats the object slightly. But you can if that's what you prefer. And then, you can go in and you can elect to be members of various different groups. So we've got Body Talk, which is for people in the body shop area. We've got Sales Talk, Tech Talk, Management Talk, I think Fleet Talk, whatever. There's all sorts of little groups for different people to join in on. And then we've got various topics. So each day of the week we've got something. So we've got Mental Health Mondays, what works Wednesdays. We've got something for the weekend, which is something a little bit different. And we've also got now as well our racetrack reflections, because two of our newest ambassadors are two young and upcoming race drivers, Ruben, Hage and Jack Tomlin. And they'll be providing their reflections from what they're doing out on the racetrack every weekend throughout the season, and the reflections of well, what does that mean for those of us that lead slightly more ordinary lives and don't do things as exciting as that. But there is obviously a link in terms of the mental health. So for example, on Sunday I went to watch Jack doing his very first race, and unfortunately within a few minutes, despite all the prep and the qualifying and all the work that goes into it, 3 minutes into the race, his steering locked and he put it into the Armco, and of course he was out. And the look of disappointment on his face was palpable, and so he's going to do a little write up on, okay, how do you kind of dust yourself off and get back in the chair, so to speak.
Yes.
So it's all stuff like that, it's getting people chatting, getting people sharing, getting people talking. And the key thing I would say as well is that the audience we're aiming this at, because we've joked before about how much I'm all over LinkedIn and social media, and what's fairly evident is that the vast majority of people out there in the industry aren't. So the stuff that's being put out there about mental health and well-being isn't getting to them. So that's why we want to encourage as many people as we can to join the app and get stuck into conversations and start sharing.
I mean, it really is a great initiative, Steve. When did you actually launch it? When did it go live, and what response have you had so far?
Well, we're still very much in I think the technical term is the beta version, so what we used to call pilot, I suppose. But yeah. It's it is live now. We're looking probably for a good couple of hundred people to join us on a free one, so that there's still spaces for that, so they can join it for free right now. And just get stuck in, because the key to this, as I think Phil said a little while ago, this isn't about capturing data. It's not about collecting names. It's actually about creating content and engagement and conversation. So what we want to do...
Yeah, I was just going to ask Steve, how are those conversations going already? Because you would have observed the different groups that you mentioned. What sort of interaction are you seeing on the app?
Well, I mean, for the people that are on it, a great amount of interaction. We've got people like, I've got to give a shout out to Rachel Murray, because she's one of our ambassadors. She's absolutely fabulous. She's a 23-year-old paint sprayer from Northern Ireland with bright blue hair, and she's very prolific on what we do. And yesterday she put a picture on there of she'd taken a dog to work with her and said, every workshop needs to have an apprentice like that. And that just created a bit of a conversation in itself of people saying, oh wow, that's lovely, and complimenting the dog and so on. of course, and she's been very open about her mental health. Rachel, that is, not the dog. And she does our Mental Health Monday videos, and she talks openly about the ups and downs of her life. And, you know, she shares that openly with people. So, of course, it's doing her the world of good as well, that she's able to sort of share the fact she's doing these things and taking the dog to work and so on. So it's that kind of interaction that we're getting. Equally, we use the rev counter analogy, and we've had a good old stream of people going on saying, you know, well, I'm regularly at a 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 or whatever it might be.
And as you say, you know, it's kind of what I've noticed with it, and you touched on it earlier, is that not everybody's on LinkedIn, not everybody's sat in front of a computer throughout a working day. You know, some of them are just on their mobile phone, and as you say with Rachel, she's in a paint booth probably for the majority of her working day, but she'll nip out and get some dinner or have a break or nip outside to get some fresh air, and she'll get on a phone at that point. And that's where she'll suddenly interact, have a bit of a chat, cheer somebody up, or want cheering up herself, or share a thought or something like that. That's really what I've seen so far, what it's about. It's just them little snippets in time to share, you know, ask a question, share some thoughts, you know, how they're feeling, etc., etc. So I think that's really, you know, what this is about from what I can see.
Totally, and that's going to be the strength of it. And, you know, it'd be very easy for me to look at it and go, we're not getting the engagement that I want. But actually, this is an organic thing that's going to grow over time. And as we get more and more members on it, you know, more people will engage and interact and do exactly as you said there, Phil, you know, and that's what we want. I mean, you know, as an example, another shout out is James Herbert is one of our ambassadors. He's a service advisor in a commercial vehicle dealership in Sheffield. And regularly at the weekend, he's into online gaming, and he's worked out a way of creating a stream that goes straight from Enable Me. So any members on there can join that, and they literally, while they're, you know, playing a game and doing whatever they do on an online computer game, can be literally having a chat about how the week's gone and what's happened for them. And, you know, and I think in the last couple of weeks that's gone from originally when he did it about 5 or 6, he's up to sort of 40, 50 people doing that regularly now.
And Steve, how can potential members join in and register? You mentioned that it's free at the moment, so where do they need to go to get the app?
Yeah, well, the app's available at menable-me.com. I think there's a QR code as well on the LinkedIn page on the Menable LinkedIn group. But yeah, that's the main one, menable-me.com. Yeah. And when they click on that, they'll get the option to pick a plan. And the first one says free, auto-generated, and then the other one says what it will be when it becomes paid. And we are going to, you know, set it at a payment plan at some point, and there's a good reason for that, and that is because there's a lot of evidence that suggests that people pay attention to something that they pay for. But, you know, when I tell you the price, I'm hoping that a lot of people will go, well, why wouldn't you? You know, and that the generated revenue from that will then get ploughed back into what we're trying to achieve with this anyway. So, but yeah, as you say, at the moment it's free, and we're looking for, you know, a good number of people to get involved and start sharing and doing what Phil's just described.
Yeah, and I must say, Steve, that the branding is absolutely spot on. Menable Me, it just works so well.
I mean, thanks. Straight away, we've been referencing it that way straight away. It does work, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, if nothing else, I've learned that I could go into marketing after all this. Yeah. And I'm good at colouring stuff in as well. That works. But no, you're right. We joked earlier that it's funny how Enable Me has almost become the brand.
Yes.
In a way, and you know, I think our strategy is spot on, really, in terms of, you know, we've gone out there with an employer-based model, and that's having success. But what we want to do now is take it out to the masses and kind of give the power of well-being to the people. If you like, because I think we've said all along that, you know, well-being in the workplace is the responsibility of the CEO, but well-being of the individual is the responsibility of themselves. We're all responsible for our own mental health, and that's difficult to take that on board if you're struggling or if you're not in a good place yourself. So to get on to Menable Me and realise you're not the only one with those issues or struggling with these things, hopefully is going to be a good thing over time.
Yeah, most definitely. And Steve, we have such good feedback to the Menable moments that you do on a you do it twice a month, so it's every other week on the podcast. So many thanks for all your contributions there. But,
that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it is good to hear the feedback that we do get, and there's a lot of positive support for it. But we've got you on, so it's a good opportunity to actually ask you, how is Menable going? We're 3 months into the year. How's it looking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing all right. I mean, we've got some good stuff going on with our members that we've got currently. We've got some good new members coming on board as well. I think I mentioned Keyloop fairly recently have joined us as one of our platinum members, and we've got some stuff planned that we're going to be looking at with them. One of our members, a smaller member, is RWC Training in Milton Keynes. Rob Ward and his team there have come on board, and funnily enough, that's actually, those two have taken us into a slightly different direction in terms of the Menable Me as well, because what we have is the capacity within the app to actually sort of create a specific area for those particular businesses. So, for example, Rob at RWC has got this cracking idea that any of the learners or delegates that go through his courses also get Menable Me membership at a heavily subsidised rate, and of course in the background what there'll be is content that we can put on Menable Me that is specific to what they would have learned at his business and on his courses. So that's a great step forward for us. We just think, wow, that's kind of really bringing it all together, if you like. And with that in mind, I mean, give you another example. One of our other members is launching some in-dealer systems stuff, and we had a conversation yesterday and said, well, how common is it that when these things are launched, we always come at it from the angle of what's the impact for the business, but what's the benefit for the customer, and we never really stop and think, well, actually, what's the benefit for the people who are using this stuff day to day? And if you're putting in a new system, it's very easy for a lot of people to spit their dummy out on day one and go, well, this is just going to cause me more work or give them even more frustration. And so what we can do with Menable Me is then perhaps put some content around tying together, well, how does new systems and new procedures or whatever it might be, how does that work from your mental health point of view, and help them out that way. So I hope that makes sense, because in my mind that all links together nicely. But
oh yes, most definitely. And you are always looking for new members for Menable, and the best way to contact you is, we do joke about your presence on social media, but you're easily found on LinkedIn. You've got the website, you're on Twitter as well, so a direct approach to you from anyone listening would be welcome, wouldn't it?
Always, yeah, absolutely, yeah. We're definitely looking for new members from employers, and we're having conversations all the time, about stuff. And of course, now with Menable Me, we've got the capacity to open that up to the wider audience as well. And just one other thing to mention that you said about what's going on for us. Of course, we've had the IMI dinner this week, and I've been involved in the diversity and inclusion task force. So we've seen some great stuff come out of that. And one of the things, not linked to that, but one of the things that one of our members has asked us to get involved in doing is some well-being checks. So that's a whole new project as well, where we will literally be available for their team to call us and just check in with us, or we check in with them, I should say, just to see, how you're doing, what's happening in your world, what's going on in the circumstances of your life, and do you need help with anything? as a way of sort of checking in that the team are okay.
No, it is great stuff, and I mean, there's like I say, the men-able moments is going down great. The work that you're doing for the industry is second to none in terms of that well-being, and in between all that, you've managed to launch this app, Men-able Me. So I mean, it's just great work that you're doing from me and Curtis's side as well. What we're seeing here through the podcast from the Motor Trade Radio, it's appreciate you being involved with it. So just finally, in terms of, I mean, let's say we as Curtis say, we do joke that you are readily available on the social channels, but for those just finally,
you've noticed,
Men-able Me, just a bit. And if they want to hear you anymore, they can find you. But just on that Men-able Me, if they want to, it is just a simple QR code. If they just before anybody goes now, just before we finish, they can find the QR code through any of your social channels. It's there. You're posting it on a regular basis for people to join, or they can join via the browser. What was the browser again?
It's menable-me.com.
And just follow the process, and if they do struggle, then reach out for support, can't they?
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think actually, you can vouch for this, Phil. I mean, what does it take, a minute or so, something like that?
Yeah, I think I did it last
set up a new profile. I think you actually did, so multitasking as well, Phil. Wow.
hey, get me.
There's a first time for everything, Steve.
Yep. There is a first time for everything, yeah, there is.
But while you're multitasking, you can't do anything else, Phil.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you only do it once. So, I mean, it just remains to say, I mean, you are back on in a week or two with another Men-able moment. I nearly said Men-able Me then. Too many Men-ables, but I'm sure it'll find its way through.
Men-able us.
Men-able us, yes. So I'm sure Curtis will say the same. We'll look forward to listening to that as we're recording to see what you're talking about on the next one. But yeah, you're welcome back on any time, and it's always great to have an actual chat between the three of us on a regular basis as well. So great work.
Yeah, thank you. Well, don't you know? Yeah, thank you. And just in reverse as well, I would say it's absolute pleasure working with you guys. And I know, actually, bizarrely, we've never physically met, but I'm sure that when we do, there will be much merriment and partaking of beers, probably, I'm sure. But it's brilliant having your support, and we really, really do appreciate it. So thank you so much, and I look forward to surprising you with something. I don't know, something off the cuff next week that might shock you. I know.
Yes,
we'll look forward to that.
I can sense the nerves already.
Yes,
I don't know what you mean. we might have to pre-listen to this one, Curtis.
Yeah, I think we'll have to. Yeah. Well, look, Steve, many thanks for joining us. Good luck with Men-able Me, and we'll definitely catch up with you in a couple of weeks for a Men-able moment. So many thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and stay safe.
Brilliant, guys. Thanks.
Well, I mean, as ever, Steve was on absolute top form then.
And I think, did we say 5 minutes at the start? I can't remember.
We did, yeah. We said, quick 5-minute interview. But there was obviously a lot of ground to cover. And it's great to hear that he's having such positive feedback because, as he says, he's basically been piloting Men-able Me, and he's getting some really, really good positive feedback on it. Yeah,
and again, I mean, we do say it on the interview there with Steve, but if you'd not joined, it's worth joining. So for the reasons that I said I joined, there's a lot of serious things on there in terms of mental health and well-being and help out there, and there's a lighter side of it with some of the things that are shared on there that it's a very interactive. So if you can join, then check out through the social channels or drop me a note and I'll certainly send you a link and get involved. I think the more involved, the more it will get. But it'll be better for everybody the more involved with it, as always with these kind of things. And as Steve made very clear, this isn't about data, this isn't about your information. This is just that you've got a place to chat and communicate and network with each other. So please do get involved if you can.
Yeah, and do reach out to Stephen on LinkedIn. So it's Stephen J. Whitton, and it's Stephen with a PH, J. Whitton. on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find him there, and he'll be more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's all
Busy
for
show.
this week.
Yeah. I mean, apologies, we've kept the headlines fairly tight for obvious reasons with the two bits there, but I think you'll agree with Curtis and I. Definitely a very insightful chat there with Steve Young on the changes there at Ford that were muted back in sort of January, February, and then have been confirmed more recently around what's happening there with the Blue Oval. And again, you know, the chat there with Steve Whitton sharing where they're up to and what they're involved with. So next week it depends what happens between now and next week, though, doesn't it, Curtis? We never know, do we? Who we'll have on and who our special guests will be. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of stories. I suspect there'll be something about EV, probably something about agency.
Agency, yeah. in fact, we could record it now.
We can take a guess on a few of these things, and possibly an acquisition as well. But who knows? Yes. We'll see.
So that really is all for this week. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.